The ranger found our camp on the fourth day. Not because we called for help. We hadn't been able to call for help since the second night, when Marcus dropped the satellite phone into the river crossing and watched it disappear under the current with the expression of a man who understood immediately that he had just changed the nature of our situation in a way that could not be undone. The ranger found us because she had been following the same thing we had been following, or rather, because she had been following us following it, and she knew these mountains well enough to know where we would end up. She came into our camp at dawn with her hand not quite on her holster and her eyes going to each of us in turn with the specific assessment of someone counting and checking and comparing what she found against what she had expected to find. There were 3 of us left. There had been 5. She looked at the 2 empty sleeping bags, and she did not ask the obvious question immediately, which told me she already knew something, and that what she knew was why her hand was near her holster. Let me tell you about the 4 days before she arrived. Let me tell you about the trail and what came off it, and what followed us back, and what Marcus heard on the second night that made him drop the phone. My name is James Calloway. I am 38 years old, a civil engineer. I live in Denver. I have been hiking since I was 12, and I have completed trails in 6 countries, and I have never, in 26 years of outdoor experience, encountered anything I could not explain through some combination of weather, wildlife, fatigue, and the specific psychological distortions that altitude and isolation can produce in even experienced hikers. I say this not to establish my credentials as someone who is not prone to irrational fear, but to establish what it cost me to arrive at the conclusion I arrived at on the 3rd night. Crouched in a tent with Marcus and Priya, listening to the sound outside, which was not weather and not wildlife, and which no combination of fatigue and altitude could explain, because all 3 of us heard it simultaneously, and all 3 of us reached for the same thing at the same time, which was the zip of the tent door, which we did not open. There were 5 of us when we started. James, which is me, Marcus Webb, no relation to the neighbor in the other story. This is a different Marcus, who was my oldest friend and who had organized the trip with the specific enthusiasm of someone who has been planning something for a long time and is finally doing it. Priya Sharma, who was Marcus's girlfriend and an experienced trail runner. Danny Okafor, who worked with me at the engineering firm and who I had invited partly because he had been asking about a serious hike for 2 years and partly because he was the kind of person whose presence in a group made everything go better. And Sophie Larson, who was Danny's girlfriend and who was less experienced than the rest of us, but who was fit and capable and who had done her research thoroughly and had better gear than any of us. We started at the Kellerman Trailhead on a Monday in late August. The trail was the Kellerman Ridge Circuit, a 4-day loop through high alpine terrain in the San Juan Range, rated difficult, recommended for experienced hikers only, requiring 2 river crossings, 1 exposed ridgeline section above tree line, and a final descent through old-growth forest that the trail guide described as technical in places. Marcus had done the first section 2 years before and had talked about going back and doing the full circuit ever since. I had looked at the map and the elevation profile and agreed it was achievable and good and the kind of trip that justifies the planning. We had the right gear, the right food, the right experience between us, and the right weather window, which the forecast confirmed through Wednesday, with a possible front moving in Thursday that we would be well clear of by the time we were back at the trailhead. The first day was perfect. The kind of hiking day that makes you understand why people do this. Clear sky, good trail, the specific quality of altitude air that tastes different from everything below it. The 5 of us moving at a comfortable pace through the first section of trail which wound through meadows and stands of aspen before climbing to the first ridge. We made camp at the designated site beside a small lake at 11,000 feet, made dinner on the camp stove, watched the stars come out with the density that only appears above 9,000 feet, and went to sleep in the easy tiredness of people who have used their bodies well and are satisfied with it. Nothing was wrong. Everything was exactly as it should be. The second day started equally well. We broke camp at 7, coffee and oatmeal. Marcus with his map and his good mood. Sophie taping a small blister on her left heel that she refused to let become a complaint. Danny and Priya talking about something with the easy back and forth of people who have recently become friends and are discovering they have more in common than expected. We hit the first river crossing at 10, a wide shallow ford that was cold and rocky underfoot but manageable. Everyone across without incident. The trail above the crossing climbed steadily through crumholes and then above tree line onto the exposed ridgeline. And this was the best section. The view in every direction. The specific exposure and exhilaration of being above everything. The sense of scale that the mountains produce and that nothing else does. We ate lunch on the ridge with the wind in our faces and the peaks spread around us, and everything was good and right and exactly what we had come for. It was on the descent from the ridge, in the early afternoon, that Danny found the cairn. Cairns are common on trails, stacked stones used as markers, and the trail had several of them on the ridgeline where the path was not always obvious. But this one was off the trail, perhaps 30 meters to the left of the marked path, in a bowl between two rock formations, and it was not the standard trail marking cairn. It was larger, perhaps a meter tall, carefully constructed with flat stones, and around its base, arranged in a pattern that was clearly deliberate, a ring of smaller stones. Danny called us over to look at it, and we stood in a loose group around it and looked at it with the mild interest that hikers take in unusual trail features. Someone built this recently, Priya said. She was crouching, looking at the base. The lichen pattern stops here. These top stones haven't been here long. People build cairns, Marcus said. It's a thing people do. Leave markers. This isn't a marker, Sophie said. Markers don't have rings around the base. Art installation, Danny said, and laughed, and took a photograph of it. Don't, I said, and then stopped, because I had no reason to say don't, and saying it without a reason was the kind of thing that makes people look at you sideways. So I said, leave it as it is. These things are better not disturbed. I'm just photographing it, Danny said, and took the photograph, and we moved on. I looked back at the cairn once as we descended, from the angle we were now at, a different angle than when we were standing around it. The arrangement of stones at the base looked different. Not a ring, something else, a shape. I couldn't determine what shape from the distance and the angle, and I kept moving. And by the time we reached the second designated campsite in the trees below the ridge, I had filed it under the general category of interesting trail feature and was thinking about dinner. The sounds started that night. Not immediately, not at dusk or in the early dark. We ate and cleaned up and went to our tents at 9, and I fell asleep quickly as I always do in the mountains after a full day. And what woke me was not sound immediately, but the specific quality of wakefulness that means something has crossed a threshold in your sleeping mind and brought you up. I lay still for a moment, orientating. Marcus's breathing beside me. He was asleep. Outside the tent, the normal sounds of a high-altitude camp at night. Wind in the trees, the creek somewhere below us, the baseline of silence that is not quite silence. And underneath all of that, just at the edge of perception, something else. I lay still and listened. It was a sound I could not immediately classify. Low, not quite rhythmic, not quite random. Somewhere between those two things, the quality of a sound that is being produced deliberately, but not mechanically. It came from the direction of the trees above the camp, upslope, which was also the direction we had come from. I listened for perhaps 5 minutes, motionless, trying to resolve it into something I recognized. Wind through a particular formation of rock or wood, an animal moving slowly through undergrowth, the creek playing tricks at distance. I could not resolve it. It remained, at the edge of perception, not quite classifiable, for the 10 or 15 minutes I lay awake listening. And then it stopped, and I lay in the silence for a while, and then went back to sleep. In the morning, I asked Marcus if he had heard anything in the night. He said he hadn't. I described what I had heard. He listened, and said it sounded like wind in the trees. I said yes, probably. We broke camp and continued on the trail. The second river crossing was at noon of the third day. After a long traverse through dense forest that felt darker than the first day's forest, which I attributed to the canopy being denser at this elevation and the trail being less used and therefore less cleared. The crossing was deeper than the first and the current was faster, the kind of crossing that requires care and a pole and the right line across. We crossed one at a time, the others waiting on the bank, and it was at this crossing that Marcus dropped the satellite phone. He had it clipped to the outside of his pack, which was not where it should have been, and in the awkward movement of the crossing it came loose and hit the water and was gone before anyone could react. Marcus stood on the far bank and looked at the water for a moment and then at the rest of us still waiting to cross. And his expression was the expression I described at the beginning, a man who understands immediately that something has changed. "My fault," he said. "I'm sorry." We crossed without further incident and stood on the bank and took stock. We had no satellite phone. We had a paper map and a compass and Danny's GPS watch which gave coordinates but could not transmit. We were 2 days from the trailhead, in terrain with no cell signal, with 5 experienced people and adequate food and gear and good weather through tomorrow. The situation was manageable. The situation was not ideal, but it was manageable. We move efficiently, I said. No extended stops. We camp tonight, and we're at the trailhead by early afternoon tomorrow. Straightforward. Everyone agreed. We moved. The second night was when it changed. We had made good camp in the last designated site, a clearing beside a stream at 9,000 feet, 3 tents. Dinner, the particular companionable exhaustion of the end of a long day. We went to bed at 8:30, an hour earlier than the previous night, to bank sleep before the long exit day. I fell asleep immediately. What woke me this time was not ambiguous. It was Marcus, sitting upright in the tent, very still, with the quality of alertness that communicates itself even in the dark without words. I sat up. I could hear him breathing, controlled, deliberately slow. "You hear it," he said. Not a question. I heard it. The same sound as the previous night, but closer, much closer. Not at the edge of perception, not at the upslope tree line, but near the camp. Within the camp perimeter, possibly. The quality of it was different at this distance. I could hear more of it, and what I could hear did not resolve into anything natural. It was not wind. It was not an animal I recognized. It had a quality I could not name, a quality of intent, the same quality that separates a mechanical sound from a sound that something is making, the difference between a door banging in the wind and a door being knocked on. "What is that?" I said. "I don't know," Marcus said. We lay still and listened. The sound continued, close, unchanging in its quality, but moving slightly in its location, shifting, as if whatever was making it was not stationary, not circling, not the methodical perimeter walk of a large predator. Something more irregular than that. More like the movement of something that was not concerned with being heard, that was simply present and moving in the way it moved. Bear, I said, not because I believed it, but because it was the category that fit the closest. Bears don't sound like that, Marcus said. He was right. I had heard bears at night before, twice, and they sounded like bears, which is to say like large animals moving through undergrowth, crashing and snuffling and producing the sounds that large animals produce when they move. This did not sound like that. This sounded like something that was choosing how to move, choosing how much sound to produce, choosing to be present in the way it was present rather than simply being present the way animals are. Marcus reached for the satellite phone in the dark. He reflex action of someone who has established in advance where the emergency equipment is, and his hand found nothing. And in the silence between that reaching and the remembering why the hand found nothing, a silence of perhaps 2 seconds, the sound outside the tent changed. Not louder, not closer, but different in quality, altered, as if whatever was making it had heard the movement inside the tent and had responded to it. As if it was paying attention to us the way we were paying attention to it. Marcus put down the hand that had found nothing. We lay still. The sound continued, changed, patient, present. We lay still for what I calculated afterward was approximately 40 minutes, though it felt much longer, before the sound gradually diminished and eventually was not there. We did not sleep again that night. We lay in the tent until the first gray of dawn and did not speak and did not move more than necessary, and when the light was enough we got up and woke the others. Priya had heard it. She had not woken Danny or Sophie, she said, because she had been afraid that movement in the tent would change something. And this was the same instinct Marcus and I had had, which told me something about what the instinct was responding to. Danny and Sophie had slept through it, which seemed to me significant, though I could not immediately say why. We broke camp in the dawn light, quickly, without the usual morning rituals. Coffee deferred. The decision to move made without discussion because all three of us who had been awake understood, without saying it, that moving was the right thing. Danny and Sophie ate bars from their pockets as we walked, and did not ask why we were moving so fast, which told me they could read the energy of the other three even without knowing its source. We were moving quickly and well, and I was calculating that we could make the trailhead by noon if we maintained pace when Sophie stopped. She was at the front, setting the pace, and she stopped on the trail and the rest of us almost walked into her. I moved up beside her to see what she was looking at. The trail ahead was blocked, not by a fallen tree or a rock slide, nothing natural. Someone had built a cairn on the trail, not a small trail marker, a large one, the same size as the one Danny had photographed the previous afternoon, perhaps a meter tall, carefully constructed, with the ring of smaller stones around its base. Built on the trail, directly in our path, between 2 points where the trail narrowed between rock formations so that going around it would mean either climbing the rock or dropping significantly off trail. We stood and looked at it. Nobody spoke for a moment. "That wasn't here yesterday," Danny said. "No," I said. "We came this way," he said. "This exact trail. This wasn't here." "No," I said again. "Someone built it overnight," Priya said. Her voice was very level, the voice of someone choosing levelness deliberately. "Or this morning," Marcus said, "before we broke camp, while we were in the tents. We looked at the cairn. We looked at the rock on either side. I looked at the arrangement of stones at the base. The ring that Sophie had said didn't look like a marker. From where I stood now, at this angle, in the morning light. I could see the shape more clearly than I had been able to see the shape of the first one at a distance. It was not a ring. It was arranged to indicate direction, like a compass rose, roughly. But not a compass rose exactly. More like an arrow, pointing not along the trail in either direction, but off trail, into the forest to the left, into the trees that grew dense and dark and descended steeply into a drainage I couldn't see the bottom of. We go around it, I said. We climb the rock on the right, and we get back on the trail past it, and we keep moving. What if it's a marker? Sophie said. What if someone put it there? Because the trail is impassable ahead, and they're directing us off trail. If the trail is impassable, there will be signs, I said. Blowdowns, damage, we'll see it. We don't follow a cairn built overnight by someone we haven't seen into a drainage we can't see the bottom of. Someone built it, Sophie said. A person built it. That means there's a person out here. Yes, I said. There is a person out here. I looked at the forest in the direction the stones pointed. We're not going where they're pointing. We climbed the rock on the right, awkward but manageable, and got back on the trail on the other side of the cairn and kept moving. I did not look back at it. Marcus did. I saw him look, and his expression when he turned back to the trail was the expression I had been managing since the previous night, the expression of someone holding something at the distance that thinking about it requires. The trail was not impassable. It was clear and well marked, and we moved through it at pace, and the trees thinned and the light increased, and by 10 in the morning we were out of the densest forest and into the more open terrain of the lower slope, and I felt something release in my chest that I had not fully known was clenched. And then Danny said, "Where's Sophie?" She had been behind him. She had been the last in our line, which is where she had been all trip, the least experienced at the back, where someone more experienced could watch her pace. Danny turned around, and the trail behind him was empty. We all stopped. We called her name. The sound went into the trees and came back as its own echo. We retraced our steps, calling her name, checking the sides of the trail, looking for any place she might have slipped or left the path. Nothing. The trail was clear, and she was not on it, and there was no sign of where she had left it. We went back past the point where we had climbed the rock around the cairn, calling, and the cairn was still there, and in the soft earth beside the trail on the left side, in the direction the stones pointed, there were boot prints. Recent. Hers. The pattern I knew from 3 days of watching her feet on the trail, going into the trees, into the drainage. Marcus said, "She went after it." She went after what? Danny said, and the question contained the specific anguish of someone who has been excluded from information they needed. "There was something in the camp last night," I said. "A sound. We didn't wake you because..." I stopped. "Because we were afraid that movement would change something. Because the instinct that something was paying attention to us made us minimize movement and sound. We should have woken you." "I'm sorry." Danny looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at the boot prints going into the trees. "She went after it," he said, quietly, repeating Marcus's words as if testing them for truth. "She didn't know to be afraid of it," Priya said. "She didn't hear it last night. She didn't know." We followed her prints into the trees. We stayed together, no splitting up, calling her name, moving carefully because the terrain off-trail dropped steeply and the undergrowth was thick. The prints were clear in the soft ground, and then they became less clear, and then they became unclear in a way that I could not entirely explain, as if whatever had been making them had changed the way it was moving, or as if something had changed in the ground itself, the soil becoming rockier, less receptive to impressions. We followed what we could follow and called her name, and the trees absorbed the sound and gave it back as echo, and nothing came back that was her voice. After 2 hours we had found nothing. We were in difficult terrain, significantly off-trail, without the satellite phone, with the light beginning to change toward afternoon. I made the decision that I have thought about every day since, and that I stand by, and that costs me something every time I stand by it. I said we go back to the trail. I said we move to the trailhead. I said we send help back as soon as we can reach anyone. Danny did not argue. He looked at the trees for a moment, and then he turned, and we went back to the trail, and we moved, and we did not stop until we made camp at the last clearing before the final descent, and we had not found Sophie, and we had not heard her voice. That was the third night. The sound came again. This time I did not try to classify it. I lay in the tent, and I listened, and I let it be what it was,
which was something I did not have words for. And after a long time it stopped, and the dawn came, and we packed and descended, and we were at the trailhead at 9 in the morning, and I had cell signal before we were fully out of the trees, and I called 911 and told them we had a missing person on the Kellerman Ridge circuit and gave them coordinates from Danny's watch and described where we had lost the trail and the ranger station had someone there within 40 minutes, and that was when the ranger came into our camp and counted us and looked at the 2 empty sleeping bags. Sophie was found on the 7th day. She was alive, physically intact, suffering from exposure and dehydration, found at the bottom of the drainage she had entered, 2 miles from where we had lost her prints. Unable to explain coherently how she had gotten there, or how long she had been moving, or what she had been moving toward. She spent 4 days in hospital and recovered fully in the physical sense of that word. She does not hike anymore. She does not discuss what happened in the drainage. Danny has told me, once, in a conversation we have not repeated, that she sometimes wakes at night and goes to the window and looks out for a long time, and that when he asks what she is looking for, she says she doesn't know. She took our statements at the trailhead in the flat professional manner of someone who has taken many statements and who organizes what she hears into categories of what she can act on and what she cannot. When I described the cairns, she wrote something in her notebook and did not look up. When I described the sound, she wrote something else. When I finished, she looked at me with the expression I have come to associate with people who know more than they are saying and have made a decision about how much of it to share. "How many times have you hiked the Kellerman?" she said. "First time," I said. She nodded. She wrote something. "Is this a known thing?" I said. "The cairns. The sound. Is this something that happens on this trail?" She looked at her notebook for a moment. Then she looked at me. "We get reports," she said. "From the Kellerman circuit specifically. Not every season, but regularly." "What kind of reports?" "Similar to what you described," she said. "Sounds at night. Structures on the trail. Hikers becoming disoriented." She paused.
"Sounds at night. Structures on the trail. Hikers becoming disoriented." She paused. "Usually people in the group who haven't heard the sound." Sophie hadn't heard it. I said, "That tends to be how it goes," she said. She closed her notebook. She stood up. "The people who hear it seem to develop she chose the word carefully, a resistance to it. The people who don't hear it, who encounter it fresh. Without that," she paused again, "without that preparation, they're more susceptible." "Susceptible to what?" I said. She looked at me for a moment, with the expression of a woman who has been a ranger in these mountains for a long time and has arrived at a position on certain questions that she holds carefully and does not share casually. "To following it," she said, "wherever it leads." She walked to her truck. She got in. She drove away. I stood at the trailhead and watched her go and looked at the mountains and the tree line and the place where the Kellerman trail disappeared into the trees. And I thought about Sophie in the drainage, 2 miles from, where we lost her, and about the cairns and the sound and the stones arranged in a shape that pointed where it wanted us to go. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. "Let's go home," he said. We went home. Marcus drove, Danny in the back, nobody talking. The mountains receded in the rearview mirror until they were just a line against the sky, and then just the sky. I have not been back to the Kellerman. I hike still, other trails, other ranges, and I carry a satellite phone in my pack in an inside pocket, and I do not photograph cairns that are off trail, and I pay attention to sounds at night in the way that the ranger's word suggested, as something that is also, in its own way, a form of protection. If I hear something I do not recognize, I lie still and I listen and I do not move, and I let it know that I am here and that I am listening. I do not know if this is right. I do not know if the thing I am communicating by listening is the thing that provides the resistance Torres described. But it is the only thing I have. And Sophie is in a city 3 states away looking out windows at night at something she cannot name. And I am here, still hiking, still paying attention, and so far whatever is on the Kellerman Trail has not found me anywhere else. So far, the mountains are still there. They were there before us, and they will be there after us, and the things that live in them, visible and otherwise, have their own relationship with the terrain that we pass through as guests, whether we understand that or not. I think about this when I am above tree line, when the scale of it is visible and the smallness of being human in it is clear and undeniable. We are passing through. Whatever we encounter, whatever hears us and responds, whatever builds its structures and produces its sounds and waits for the ones who don't know to be afraid, we are passing through its space. The best we can do is pay attention and move carefully and bring people home. I brought 3 home. I think about the 2 I didn't. Every time I hike, every time the trail goes into trees and the sound changes, I will think about them for the rest of my life. Not with guilt exactly. I made the right decisions with what I knew. I know this. But with the specific weight of things that happened and cannot be undone. The weight that experienced people carry when experience wasn't enough. The morning came. It keeps coming. I lace my boots and I check my pack and I look at the trailhead and I go in. Carefully, with my satellite phone in the inside pocket and my ears open. And I come back out. Every time so far I come back out. So far is enough. For now, so far is enough. I want to tell you about the week after we got back. Because the week matters. And because what happened in it changed how I understand what we encountered on the Kellerman. And because I think it might be useful to someone who has been in similar terrain and heard similar things and is trying to decide what to make of it. Danny called me on the Wednesday. Sophie was still in hospital, stable, the doctor satisfied with her physical recovery and less certain about everything else. And Danny had been sleeping at a hotel near the hospital and eating badly and not talking to anyone except the doctors and me. He called and I answered and he said, without preamble, I went back to the trailhead. I sat down. When? I said. Yesterday, he said. I didn't go in. I just drove up and sat in the parking lot and looked at the trail entrance. A pause. James. There was a cairn in the parking lot. I said nothing for a moment. In the parking lot, I said. At the edge, he said. Where the parking lot meets the trailhead. Small. 5 or 6 stones. Not a trail marker. The ring at the base. Was it there when we left? I said. I don't know. He said. I wasn't looking for it. I don't know if it was. He paused. I took it apart. I scattered the stones. Okay, I said. Is that right? He said. Should I have left it? I thought about what Torres had said. About the ones who hear the sound and develop a resistance. About the ones who don't. About susceptibility and following. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know enough about what the cairns mean or how they work to know if taking one apart is right or wrong. What I know is that Sophie followed the direction one pointed and ended up 2 miles down a drainage, unable to explain how she got there. I think taking it apart was reasonable. She's asking to go back, Danny said. His voice had changed, quieter, the quiet of something he had been sitting with since before the call. Sophie is asking to go back to the trail. She said it this morning, he said, to the doctor. Who told me? She said she needs to go back, that she left something there, that something is unfinished. He stopped. She doesn't remember saying it. When the doctor told her she'd said it, she looked confused. She said she doesn't want to go back, that she's afraid of the mountains now. But she said it, James. She was awake and she said it clearly, and she doesn't remember. I sat with this for a long time. The phone in my hand, Danny's breathing on the other end, the ordinary sounds of my Denver apartment around me. Don't let her go back, I said. Whatever she said and doesn't remember saying, don't let her go back to the Kellerman. How do I stop her if she decides she wants to? He said. You tell her what I just told you. I said. You tell her that she said it without knowing she said it. You tell her what the ranger said about people who don't hear the sound. You give her the information and let her make the choice with it. I paused. And if she still wants to go back, you call me and we figure out what to do. She didn't go back. She recovered and left hospital and they moved, both of them, to another city, which was not only or entirely about Sophie, but which I understand, in context, as at least partly about distance. 3 states away, as I said. The windows. The looking. I called Torres 2 weeks after we got back. She answered, which surprised me. I had half expected the ranger station number to connect to someone who didn't know what I was talking about. She knew immediately who I was. Your friend is recovering, she said. Not a question. Yes, I said. She's going to be okay. Good, Torres said, with a brevity that contained something I couldn't quite read. I want to understand what happened, I said. The cairns, the sound, what it is. You said you get reports. How many reports? How long has this been documented? A pause. How much do you want to know? She said. All of it, I said. She was quiet for a moment, deciding. The Kellerman reports go back to the late 1970s, she said, in the ranger station records. Before that, in the local historical records, there are accounts from prospectors and early settlers in the 1880s and 1890s describing unusual sounds in that specific drainage system and structures found on routes through the area. Whether those earlier accounts describe the same phenomenon, I can't say for certain. The consistency of the description is notable. What does it want? I said. The thing that makes the cairns. What is it trying to do? We don't know. Torres said. I don't know. I've been working this district for 16 years and I've responded to 11 incidents connected to the Kellerman specifically, not counting reports that didn't involve search and rescue. What I've observed is consistent with what you described. Something produces sounds. Something builds structures. It seems to direct or draw certain individuals. The individuals it draws are consistently the ones who have not been exposed to the sounds, who encounter it fresh. She paused. The ones who have heard the sounds, who have the resistance I mentioned, seem to be able to identify when others in their group are at risk. The ones who come to me afterward, the ones like you, they all describe the same moment. The moment when they knew someone else was susceptible and didn't act quickly enough. I should have woken them, I said. Danny and Sophie. When Marcus and I first heard it. Probably, Torres said. Exposure seems to help. Whether it's the sound itself or knowing to be afraid of it, I can't say. But the people in your situation, the ones who knew and didn't tell, they all say what you just said. You should close the trail? Who have the resistance I mentioned, seem to be able to identify when others in their group are at risk. The ones who come to me afterward, the ones like you, they all describe the same moment. The moment when they knew someone else was susceptible and didn't act quickly enough. I should have woken them, I said. Danny and Sophie. When Marcus and I first heard it. Probably, Torres said. Exposure seems to help. Whether it's the sound itself or knowing to be afraid of it, I can't say. But the people in your situation, the ones who knew and didn't tell, they all say what you just said. You should close the trail? You don't assume that some people can handle the information and some can't. You tell everyone and you let everyone hear the sound if it comes. And you do not spend a night in those mountains with people who haven't been told. I'll remember that, I said. Don't go back to the Kellerman, she said. Not for a while. Not until you've processed this completely. The ones who go back too soon. She stopped. What? I said. They start building cairns, she said, quietly, and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that call. I sat in my apartment in Denver, And I thought about what Torres had said and what it meant that the ones who went back too soon started building cairns. What that transition looked like. Whether Sophie's looking out windows at night was the beginning of something, or just the aftermath of trauma, or both. Whether the distinction between those two things mattered. Whether there was anything I could do with the answer either way. I called Marcus. I told him what Torres had said, all of it, including the last part. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Marcus, who was normally an active and vocal listener. When I finished, there was a silence. The cairn in the parking lot, he said. The one Danny took apart. Yes, I said. Before Danny took it apart, Marcus said slowly. Did it point toward the trail or away from it? I thought about this. Danny didn't say. I said, because if it pointed toward the trail, Marcus said, that's one thing. But if it pointed away from it, if it was pointing toward the parking lot, toward the road, that's different. That means it followed us out. That means it's not only in the mountains. I had not thought about this. I sat with it. I'll ask Danny. I said. I asked Danny. He thought about it, closed his eyes in the way he does when he is trying to reconstruct a visual memory, and then he said, slowly, away from the trail, toward the parking lot, toward the road. I thanked him. I hung up. I looked at my apartment walls. I have not driven up to the Kellerman trailhead since we got back. I don't know if the parking lot cairn was a one-time thing or if there are others. I don't know if what built it followed us all the way back to Denver or if it simply extended its range briefly to that parking lot and then retreated. I know that I have not heard the sound since we came back. Not here. Not in my apartment on a quiet night when the city is doing its sleeping things outside my window. I know that my satellite phone is charged and in the inside pocket of my pack, and that I hike carefully and tell everyone in my group everything before we go in, and I watch the terrain for off-trail cairns with rings at their base. I know that Marcus called me last month and said he wanted to go back to the San Juans. Different trail, not the Kellerman. And we talked about it for a long time, and eventually we agreed that yes, next summer, a different trail, and that we would tell everyone everything before we went in. I know that whatever is on the Kellerman is patient, and that patience is its main tool, and that the best response to patience is the kind of attention that makes you harder to move without your knowledge, the kind that keeps you on the trail you chose rather than the one being indicated. The mountains are still there. They will be there when I go back next summer on a different trail with Marcus and whoever else comes, with satellite phones and the knowledge of what to watch for and the instructions passed along as Torres passed them to me. Tell everyone. Keep the group together. Don't let anyone separate who hasn't heard the sound. And if you find a cairn with a ring at the base, off trail or on it, you do not follow where it points. You note it. You tell your group. You go around it or through it or back the way you came, but you do not follow. You choose your own direction. That is the only protection available. It is enough. It has been enough so far, and so far is what we have, and so far I will take. The trail goes in and comes back out. I go in and I come back out. Every time so far. Every time. There is one more thing I want to tell you. Something that happened 3 weeks ago that I have not told Marcus or Danny or anyone else, because I am still deciding what it means and whether sharing it serves any purpose beyond burdening other people with something they cannot act on. I was on a different trail. The Womanish, which I have done twice before. A trail I know well, a trail I trust. Alone, which I don't normally do, but which felt right that day. A short out and back, 8 miles round trip to a lake I like. Clear weather, back before dark, simple. I was 3 miles in, moving well. The kind of hiking flow where the body is doing its thing without requiring the mind to manage it. And I was thinking about a project at work. a bridge design I had been going over in my head when I saw it. Off trail, 30 meters to the right, a cairn, not large, half a meter, but carefully constructed. And at the base, the arrangement of stones. The ring that is not a ring. I stopped on the trail and looked at it for a long time. The arrangement at the base, in the afternoon light, pointed up slope, toward a rocky section I could see the beginning of but not the top of. I stood on the trail and I breathed and I ran through the checklist. Was I tired? No, I had slept well. Was I disoriented? No, I knew exactly where I was. Had I heard anything unusual? No, the trail had been quiet and ordinary all morning. Was there any reason at all, to follow where the stones pointed? No, none. There was a lake 3 miles ahead, and a trail I knew, and a car at the trailhead, and a project at work I wanted to think about, and no reason in any category to leave the trail and climb toward a rocky section I couldn't see the top of. I took out my phone. I photographed the cairn from where I stood. I noted the coordinates on my GPS. Then I continued on the trail toward the lake. I did not feel the pull that Sophie must have felt, or if I felt it, I felt it as an awareness rather than a compulsion, as information rather than instruction. This is what Torres meant, I think, by resistance, not immunity, not the inability to perceive the direction being indicated, but the capacity to perceive it and choose not to follow, to know what it is and to keep walking anyway. I reached the lake. I ate my lunch on a flat rock at the shore and watched the light on the water and thought about the bridge project and drank my coffee from the thermos, and it was entirely and completely a good day in the mountains. The lake was where I had last seen it. The mountains were where I had last left them. The sky was doing its afternoon thing with the light, and I was there, present and alive and choosing where to put my feet. On the way back, I passed the cairn again. It was still there, still pointing upslope. I looked at it from the trail as I passed. I noted it again. I did not stop. I did not touch it. I did not scatter the stones the way Danny had scattered the parking lot cairn, because I have been thinking about that since Torres said what she said about the ones who go back and start building cairns. And I have been wondering if taking them apart is right or wrong, if the stones have meaning only in their arrangement, or if something is communicated by the dismantling. I left it as it was. I kept walking. I was back at the trailhead by 3 in the afternoon, and I drove home and made dinner and called my mother, who lives in Colorado Springs and who asks me every time I call from a trail whether I had a good hike, and I said yes, and it was true. I reported the cairn to the ranger station for the Weminush district, a different ranger than Torres, who did not know my name or my incident and who listened with professional courtesy and said he would note it and check the area. He did not ask me how I knew it was significant. He just said he would note it and check the area. I said thank you and hung up. And I have been thinking since about how many ranger stations and how many mountain districts have a folder somewhere with reports like this one, received with professional courtesy and noted and filed, and about whether those folders are ever compared across districts and what a comparison would show about the distribution of these things across the ranges, and about whether Torres has ever had a conversation with rangers in other districts about what she knows and what they know and what the overlap is. I sent Torres an email. I described the Weminush cairn, the location, the coordinates, the arrangement at the base. I asked her if she knew of similar reports from other districts. She replied 3 days later, 2 sentences. Thank you for reporting this. Stay on the trail. That was all. I read it twice and then a third time, and I understood it as the complete thing it was. A piece of information and an instruction, both necessary, neither expandable. Thank you for reporting. Stay on the trail. These are the two available actions. You report what you find, so that someone who is keeping the larger record has the information. And then you stay on the trail, which is not passivity, not avoidance, not the refusal to engage. It is the choice to move through the terrain on your own terms, in the direction you chose, at the pace you set. It is the fundamental assertion of the hiker. I came here to go somewhere, and I am going there, and I am going to come back. I am going back to the San Juans next summer. A different trail, a longer circuit. Marcus and probably two other people whose names I don't yet know, but who will be told everything before we go in. I will tell them about the Kellerman and about Sophie and about the cairns and about the sound. And I will tell them what to do if they hear the sound and what to do if they see a cairn with a ring at its base. And I will make sure that when we go into the mountains, we go in with the information we need. All of us, equally, with no one carrying the knowledge alone. Because that is the other thing I learned. The ones who hear the sound and don't tell, who lie in their tents and listen and choose not to wake the people who haven't heard it, those are the ones who lose someone. Not from malice, not from selfishness, from the specific paralysis of encountering something unprecedented and not yet having a framework for what to do. I had no framework. I lay in the tent on the second night listening to it outside, and what I felt, underneath the fear, was a kind of wrongness, a knowledge that what I was doing was not right even as I was doing it. I should have woken Danny and Sophie. I should have told them immediately and completely what Marcus and I had been hearing and what it felt like and what our instincts said about it. That is what I should have done, and that is what I will do next time. If there is a next time, because there is always a next time in the mountains. And the mountains are patient, and the only answer to patience is information shared widely and immediately among people who are going into it together. Marcus called last week. He wanted to talk about gear for next summer, the specific pleasure of planning a trip in the winter when the mountains are there, but not immediately, when they can be thought about rather than managed. We talked for an hour about pack weights and trail conditions, and the specific section of the new circuit he was most looking forward to. And at the end of the call he said, with the casual certainty of someone returning to something they were always going to return to, "We're going to do this right next time." "Yes," I said. "Tell everyone everything." He said, "Tell everyone everything." I said, "And we bring Sophie." He said, "If she wants to come, if she's ready. We don't make her afraid of mountains forever." I thought about Sophie looking out windows at night, reaching for something she can't name. "If she wants to come," I said. Yes, with everything told and everything known and everyone together and nobody separated from the group who hasn't been told. "Good," Marcus said. "That's good." We said goodnight. I sat in my apartment and looked at my hiking gear stacked neatly in the corner of the spare room, ready, as it always is, for the next time. The mountains were somewhere to the west, in the dark, where they always were, and what was in them was where it always was, and both of those things would be true next summer and the summer after, and for as long as there are mountains and people who go into them. I lace my boots and I go in and I come back out, with my satellite phone and my information and my eyes open and my group informed. Every time so far I come back out. So far is enough. The trail goes forward. I go forward with it. That is what hikers do. That is what I will keep doing. Go in. Come back out. Tell everyone everything. Every time. I want to say something about fear, because I have been talking around it and I think it deserves to be addressed directly. Since fear is the thing that most people expect from a story like this, and what I actually experienced on the Kellerman was both more and less than fear in the way that word is usually understood. Fear is responsive. It rises when a threat presents itself and falls when the threat passes or is resolved. What I experienced on the second night in the tent, listening to the sound, was something different. It was not the adrenaline spike of immediate danger, not the physical cascade of flight response, not the sharp, bright fear of a thing that could be run from or fought. It was slower than that, more fundamental, the kind of response that comes from the oldest part of the brain, the part that predates language and analytical thought by several 100,000 years. The part that knows things before it can say what it knows. That part knew, on the second night, that the sound outside the tent was something it did not have a category for. And the absence of a category was the frightening thing, not the sound itself. The sound was slow and patient and unhurried. It had no urgency. It communicated nothing that felt like immediate danger. What it communicated was presence. A very old, very patient, very deliberate presence, aware of us and interested in us in a way that was not aggressive, but that was not benign either. That was something else, something for which I still do not have the right word, something in between those categories or outside them entirely. Torres used the word susceptibility. I have thought about that word a great deal. Susceptibility to what exactly? Not to harm in the direct physical sense. Sophie came back alive and physically intact. Susceptibility to influence, perhaps, to being moved, directed, drawn towards something the way a compass needle is drawn toward north, not by force, but by the specific alignment of something in you with something in the terrain. Sophie had something in her that aligned with what was on the Kellerman, and it drew her off trail and into the drainage. And when they found her, she was 2 miles from where we lost her prints and unable to explain the distance. What happened in those 2 miles is the question I have and will not answer, because Sophie does not say and I do not ask. What I will say is this: the resistance Torres described, the thing that hearing the sound seems to produce, feels to me less like immunity and more like calibration. It had no urgency. It communicated nothing that felt like immediate danger. What it communicated was presence. A very old, very patient, very deliberate presence, aware of us and interested in us in a way that was not aggressive, but that was not benign either. That was something else, something for which I still do not have the right word, something in between those categories or outside them entirely. Torres used the word susceptibility. I have thought about that word a great deal. Susceptibility to what exactly? Not to harm in the direct physical sense. Sophie came back alive and physically intact. Susceptibility to influence, perhaps, to being moved, directed, drawn towards something the way a compass needle is drawn toward north, not by force, but by the specific alignment of something in you with something in the terrain. Sophie had something in her that aligned with what was on the Kellerman, and it drew her off trail and into the drainage. And when they found her, she was 2 miles from where we lost her prints and unable to explain the distance. What happened in those 2 miles is the question I have and will not answer, because Sophie does not say and I do not ask. What I will say is this: the resistance Torres described, the thing that hearing the sound seems to produce, feels to me less like immunity and more like calibration. Like your compass needle, learning to account for local magnetic variation. You still feel the pull, but you can factor it into your reading. You can look at the cairn pointing upslope and feel the direction it indicates and know, simultaneously, that the direction it indicates is not the one you are choosing. You can be moved by it without following it. You can hear it and stay in your tent. The hearing is the protection, not the not hearing. The knowing is the protection, not the not knowing. This is why telling everyone everything matters. Sophie did not know. She had not heard the sound, had not been told about the sound. And when she encountered whatever she encountered in those early morning hours of the fourth day, she had no calibration for it. She had nothing to factor into her reading. The pull was just the pull, unmodified, unaccounted for, and she followed it. I will never let that happen again in my presence. That is the commitment I made on the drive back from the Kellerman. Sitting in the back seat with my eyes closed, Marcus driving, Danny looking out the window at the mountains going past. I made it silently, and I have kept it since, and I will keep it as long as I go into mountains. The specific shape of the commitment is this. I tell everyone everything before we go in. Not a version of everything. Not the version I think they can handle. Everything. The sound and the cairns and the susceptibility and what happened to Sophie and what Torres said and what the ones who go back too soon start doing. Everything. And then I listen to what the people I am going in with do with that information. And if they decide they don't want to go in, I respect that. And if they decide they want to go in anyway, I respect that too. And we go in together, informed, with our satellite phones charged, and our eyes open, and our group intact, and nobody separated who hasn't heard the whole account. Marcus understood this immediately when I told him, which is one of the reasons Marcus and I have been friends for 20 years. He has the specific quality of receiving information without needing it to be different from what it is. He said, on the phone, when I told him all of it, including the womanish cairn, okay, so we tell everyone everything, and we keep the group together, and we come back out. Yes, I said, and Sophie, he said, if she wants to come back, we tell her everything first and let her choose. Yes, and if she chooses to come, he said, we keep her close. Yes, I said, exactly that. There is a version of this story that ends with a warning. Don't go into these mountains. Stay away from the Kellerman Trail. The thing in the drainage is real, and it takes people, and the ranger station knows and cannot close the trail, and you should be afraid. I understand the impulse toward that ending. It is protective. It is the version that prioritizes the safety of the person hearing the story over their autonomy, as someone who might want to hike the Kellerman someday for their own reasons. But I don't believe in that ending. The mountains are there. People will go into them. The thing on the Kellerman is patient, and it has been there long enough to have accumulated whatever it is that makes cairns appear overnight on trails, and people will keep encountering it. And the warning, don't go, will not reach everyone, and will not be followed by everyone it does reach. What might reach people, what might actually help, is the information. The specific information, actionable, distributable, useful even to someone who encounters it fresh with no warning at a ranger station trailhead on their way in. The cairns, the ring at the base, the direction they indicate and what following that direction has historically produced. The sound, its quality, its location, what it means that it moved when we moved inside the tent. The significance of who hears it and who doesn't, and what that difference means for the group. The instruction to tell everyone everything before you go in. The commitment to keep your group together, to not let anyone separate who hasn't been told, to move efficiently, to come out. This is the version of the ending that I believe in. Now don't go. Go carefully, with information, together, and come back out. The trail goes forward. Go forward with it, prepared, and come back. Torres sent me one more email, a month after the one that said stay on the trail. This one was longer, 3 paragraphs, which was unusual for her. She said she had spoken to 2 rangers in adjacent districts about reports consistent with the Kellerman pattern. She said the reports existed. She said the distributions of cairn sightings and unusual sound reports and disorientation incidents suggested a wider range than she had previously understood. not limited to the Kellerman drainage, but present in several interconnected drainages across a significant area of the range. She said she was maintaining a record and would continue to do so. She said, in the last sentence of the last paragraph, in the flat professional tone that was, I had come to understand the tone she used when she was saying something she meant most seriously. The people who come back and tell me what they experienced are the most useful thing I have. Keep coming back and keep telling me. I wrote back and said I would. I'm in it completely. I will keep going into mountains, carefully, together, informed, and I will come back and I will report what I find, to Torres and to whoever asks. Because the record matters and the information matters, and the people who go in after me deserve to have what I know before they go. The mountains are still there. The trail goes in. I will go in again. I will come back out. I will tell you everything. Go carefully. Tell everyone. Come back out. The morning always comes for the ones who do.